All right, let's get into it. We are diving into one of the most incredible and honestly brutal chapters in the entire story of space exploration, the Soviet Union's relentless quest to conquer Venus. It's a story packed with forgotten firsts and some truly spectacular failures. And this right here, this is a picture from the final space probe to ever land on Venus. Think about that for a second. Our closest planetary neighbor. And this marks the end of a long, really dramatic story.
So that leads to the two big questions we're going to tackle here. What did they actually find? And maybe more importantly, why on earth haven't we been back since? The answers? Well, they're a wild mix of genius engineering, just crushing disappointment, and a planet that turned out to be more hostile than anyone's worst nightmare. You see, back in the early days of the space race, Venus was a complete mystery box. Some folks genuinely thought it could be a paradise, a lush tropical world teeming with alien life. But then you had people like the great Carl Sagan, who predicted basically the exact opposite, a total hellscape, a runaway greenhouse effect that had scorched the entire planet into a furnace. And here's the thing, unlike Mars, right, we could point a telescope at Mars and see its surface. But Venus, it was just clouds, a thick, impenetrable layer that completely hid the truth. So there was only one way to find out what was really down there. You had to go.
And in the early 60s, let's be real, the Soviet Union was crushing the space race. First satellite, Sputnik, first human in space, Yuri Gagarin, they were all about racking up those historic firsts. So their next target was pretty obvious, Venus. This wasn't just about science. This was pure Cold War prestige. So they tried. Their first couple shots, Venera 1 and 2, well, they were total system failures. They just died on the way there. And you gotta remember, this is the early 60s. They were doing interplanetary navigation with what were essentially slide rules. This stuff was incredibly hard. And while the Soviets were hitting these roadblocks, NASA saw their chance and swooped right in. In 1962, their Mariner 2 probe nails the flyby. It becomes the first successful close-up look at another planet, a huge win for the Americans. But the data Mariner 2 sent back, boy, it was bad. It basically confirmed Carl Sagan's hellscape theory. The temperatures were off the charts, way over 450 degrees Fahrenheit, and the cloud layer was massive, like 50 miles high. The findings were so grim that NASA basically looked at Venus and said, you know what, we're good, and pivoted to the moon and, of course, Mars.
But the Soviets, they weren't quitting. They saw this as a golden opportunity. With the Americans out of the picture, Venus was theirs for the taking. So they doubled down. They were absolutely convinced there was a monumental first just waiting for them. It was a massive engineering challenge, but they just dove headfirst into it. So they knew about the heat. They were prepared for that. But what they were about to find out was that there was another enemy, a totally invisible one, atmospheric pressure. See, on Venus, the air is so incredibly dense and heavy that it stops behaving like a gas. It's more like a liquid, like trying to move through deep water. And this is where Venera 4 comes in. It was a partial success, which is a huge deal. It was the first spacecraft to actually enter another planet's atmosphere and send back data from inside. For 90 minutes, it's transmitting, telling them it's getting hotter, and then silence. So what happened? Well, the reason it went silent was just mind-blowing. It didn't overheat, it didn't just break. It was literally crushed like a beer can by the sheer weight of the atmosphere. And this perfectly captures the Soviet approach. They knew their next two probes, Venera 5 and 6, were probably gonna get crushed too. And you know what they did? They launched them anyway. They figured, let's get as much data as we can before they implode. And when they did, they just went back to the drawing board to build something even tougher. So they built Venera 7, a tank. And guess what? It made it. It survived. And the first piece of data it sent back from the surface was just staggering. First, the temperature, 475 degrees Celsius. That's almost 900 degrees Fahrenheit. We're talking hot enough to melt lead. Then the pressure, 92 times the pressure we feel here on Earth at sea level. Imagine being a kilometer deep in the ocean. That's what it feels like just standing on the surface of Venus. And, oh yeah, if that wasn't enough, the clouds, they're full of sulfuric acid, the same stuff that's in your car battery. So you've got crushing pressure, furnace-like heat, and acid rain. Yeah, welcome to Venus. Okay, so at this point, you think they just give up, right? But their next successful probe, Venera 8, found something that changed everything, a little glimmer of hope. It turns out that even with those insane clouds, a tiny bit of sunlight actually made it all the way to the surface. And that meant maybe, just maybe, they could do what? Take a picture. The goal shifted. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about seeing. The new holy grail for the Venera program was to take the first photograph from the surface of another planet. So how do you get a camera to the surface fast enough? Well, they came up with this piece of engineering that is just beautifully brutal. They figured out parachutes were too slow. The probe would just cook on the way down. So their solution? Ditch the parachute, use a massive aero brake to slam on the brakes in the upper atmosphere, and then just drop the lander. Literally drop it like a rock onto this giant shock-absorbing ring. Get it down there as fast as humanly possible. And wouldn't you know it, it actually worked. October 22nd, 1975. Venera 9 slams onto the surface, the lens cap pops off like it's supposed to, and there it is. For the first time in human history, we weren't looking at another world, we were standing on it, looking out.
And that was just the beginning. This kicked off a whole string of incredible firsts. Venera 9 gave us that first black and white photo, Venera 10 showed us ancient lava flows, then Venera 13 comes along and gets us the first color photo and, get this, the first sounds from another world. They even managed to drill into the ground and analyze the soil. An absolutely incredible run. So when you lay it all out like this, the legacy of the Venera program is just staggering. First to measure the atmosphere from inside, first to land on another planet, first photo, first color photo, first sound recording. These aren't just Soviet firsts, these are human firsts. Monumental achievements in the history of exploration, full stop. Which, of course, brings us back to that big question from the beginning. If it was so successful, why did we stop? And the answer, honestly, is just grimly practical. First, it was ridiculously expensive for a pretty small payoff. I mean, the longest any of these landers survived was just 2 hours. At the same time, the Soviet Union was starting to crumble. And over at NASA, they realized their rovers could last for years on Mars, making it a way, way better investment. And just like that, it was over. The photos stopped. The sounds went silent. For decades now, the surface of Venus, our closest neighbor, has been completely alone, untouched, unseen by any machine we've built. It's still one of the solar system's biggest mysteries, hiding right next door. And it just makes you wonder, doesn't it? What else is down there, waiting to be discovered?